everyone, welcome to Filipina on the Rise. I'm Crystal Fabella, host and founder. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so that you never miss out on new video content. You can find all episodes on most podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Anchor, FM, and more. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
A lot of our families spend to show that their sacrifice leaving the Philippines is worth it, and to show other Filipinos, I'm doing great. I don't know about you.
As if that supersedes what's happening on the back end.
Exactly.
It's like you just got to show you've made it.
You just got to show you've made it. The only way we can take the attention of the people at the top is when we control our money differently, because money talks, and money is the only language that they speak at the top.
Welcome to the Filipina on the Rise podcast, where I spotlight Pinay powerhouses, meaning Filipino women doing big things and making an impact. I'm your host, Crystal Fabella, and I want to elevate Filipina excellence and celebrate what it means to be a Filipina. Today, we're talking to Berna Anat, who is a financial literacy educator, video producer, speaker, and a writer, or as most of us know her as the financial hype woman, who's dedicated to making financial literacy more funny, accessible, and more brown for young people everywhere. She runs HeyBerna, a financial literacy media series, and has been featured on everything from Forbes, Yahoo Finance, Medium, and more. On this episode, we're going to cover her journey as a financial influencer, break down and decolonize our financial falsehoods that have been passed down by generations in the Filipino community. And at the very end, we offer up tips and tricks that you can walk away with to take a step closer to your personal financial freedom and empowerment.
In your own words, who is Berna? What do you do? And what is your mission?
Oh man, okay. That's so funny because it feels separate. Like, who is Berna feels separate from who is HeyBerna, right? And like the financial mission. So
okay. I want to know who Berna is.
Yes, that's a very good question, because I'm like, I want to know who Berna is too. Like, who's this be? I would say Berna is a Filipina American who is working very much on being less American and more Filipina. I always tell people that I'm like Kirkland brand Filipina, because I was born and raised in South San Francisco, California. Full Filipina. My mom is from Davao and Mindanao. My dad is from Manila. But I mean, really, really raised American, because my parents, I think a lot of people can relate to this, my parents really wanted us as kids to be as assimilated as possible. Exactly. No accent, really wanted us to blend. Berna is a natural cheerleader. She gets excited, and she, by me, I'm going to talk in the third person for no damn reason. I get excited about everything all the time. I remember growing up and like I was a cheerleader in high school. And I remember thinking tangentially, like, is there a job in which I could just get paid to be excited about stuff? Like, can I just be excited? So at the very core, Berna is an enthusiast. She's a cheerleader. She's a person who was put on this earth to get people excited about themselves, and looks like in this part of my career, get people excited about something that we're not usually excited about, which is money. And so
can I go off of that and just say the reason why I was very drawn to Berna when I first saw her, it was at the Entrepreneur Summit. Yay. And she was giving a lightning talk. And her energy just galvanized the room. And so this was the first line that really hooked me.
There are no financial idols, analysts, teachers, creators that looked like me, that looked like us, that sounded like us. So I was like, what? But it's not like I looked at the money world and I was like, oh my God, this place needs some vitamin me. No, that's not how I felt. Because sometimes I feel that way, but not this time. I had internalized all the same shame and all the same silence that all of us in this room have felt about money at some point. But the more I started to share what I was learning about budgeting, what I was learning about debt online, the more I had overwhelming feedback, not just from people, but from women of color specifically. That's when I was like, ooh, we are onto something here.
Oh my God, so weird to hear yourself.
So the part that really I loved, y'all have to watch it, was when she was like, it needs more melanin. And it just made me realize how the financial world, when you think about it conceptually in your head, you see white men. Yes. And you see Wall Street and people in gray suits. And then you see Berna. And if you haven't seen her YouTube yet, she's twerking. And she's talking about finances.
That's right.
Like what? Okay. I'm going to let you continue.
Yeah, I try to not just bring enthusiasm and like cheer to, not just finance, but everything they do, but also like how can I put something in the world that hasn't been there before, right? And I think one thing that, of course, I'm sure that you encourage your listeners to do, and you encourage your listeners to do with just the creation of this podcast and this brand, is to putting yourself out there in a way that the world has never seen before. And that's like sort of the most natural expression of yourself, right? What you make, what you create is something that's already never been there before.
And Berna, you actually talked about how you've been on podcasts before, right?
Yes.
And you would talk about you would talk about financial freedom and owning our financial stories. But what is a theme within a lot of, the speeches that you feel like you haven't gotten to promote as much of?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So I was so excited to come on Filipinas on the Rise because I was specifically able to kind of bang this drum that I've been banging pretty much all year long, but I feel like it would resonate the most with the listeners of Filipinas on the Rise. Mm-hmm. And that is the way that money moves in communities of people of color and of immigrants and children of immigrants, but in the Filipino and Filipino-American community specifically, the way that money moves, the way that we think about finances or we don't think about finances, the way that shame shows up in our finances that is so specific to our experience. I think the mistake that a lot of us make when we think about money and the way that money works in our worlds, we think that it's just a matter of numbers. We think that it's just a matter of, the dollars and the cents. But money is so entrenched in our personalities, in our histories. And because it's entrenched in our histories, it's also so entrenched in our culture. And money shows up in our lives. And it actually represents so much of what's happened to our ancestors and the people who came before us. And so there's just so much to dig into that's Filipino specific.
Oof, we are about to go on a journey.
Yes, a huge one.
A journey back generations to our ancestors. And how many of us can relate that money was not talked about in our families? Our parents did not share their finances. We just did not talk about it.
We did not.
So I'm excited about that. Yes. Berna went through a lot of different positions and experiences before she got here. I don't know if y'all know this, but she was a freelance writer for 17 magazine when you were at USC.
Yes.
You're a program director for this teen camp. It seems like there's this running thread for working with the youth.
Yes.
Love
always.
That. Through all that, I bet you didn't go into college thinking, I'm going to be a financial consultant.
Oh my God,
for
never.
my people.
Never.
So tell me about how you got there. The $50,000 debt, 50K. And then credit card debt. And that's the line that I think pulls people in. I paid off this much debt after creating my own budgeting system. What went on during this time as a writer, producer, whatever, going into the financial world?
Yes. Oh my God. I 100% never, ever, ever in a million years thought I would ever get into finance anything. I was as you saw, in my sort of career, I was a writer. I did youth programming. I was always that person that was I'm not good at math or science. Bye. I'm going to be a PR major. I'm in a communication school. Numbers are my enemy. Words are my friend. And when I think back, I couldn't convince my college self that I would ever get into finance because it's so no one in my family was into finance. There was no kind of financial background ever. And I think this is true for a lot of children of immigrants that you just have no financial background. Right. You have no means.
Well, it's the concept of I would never get into that because it's not for me, but it should be something everyone has a skill set and knowledge on.
Exactly. It should be a required life skill.
It should. Exactly.
But
and I know you were doing work to do that, but
yes.
Anyways, back to the story.
Yes, of course. So I would have had no idea because I was always, I believe that same story that a lot of us tell in our heads, which is just I'm just not good with money. I'm just not. As if it's this God ordained thing that we're supposed to be good at or bad at. I was I'm not good with money, not good with numbers, whatever. And what got me into it was I was broke as hell in New York City, broke as hell. And I was a freelance writer and I was lucky enough to, take the chance to be a freelance writer, but I also had gotten so used to being bad at money that it was almost I thought it was a quirky personality trait. You know what I mean? Where I was just I'm broke and I'm a hot mess, blah, blah, blah. And I also noticed that, oh, hey friends. I also noticed that there were so many other people who kind of like to repeat the same refrain of just we're bad at money, blah, blah, blah. Me and all my friends are bad at money and broke and in our 20s in New York City. And it wasn't until I stopped being freelance, I actually got a full-time job to come back to San Francisco, that I was okay, this is the universe's way of saying, Berna, you don't get to be a financial hot mess anymore. You're going to get a paycheck every other Friday. This is an amazing blessing. And that's when I was maybe I should look into, and I always call it the ancient Caucasian art of budgeting. Maybe I should finally see what this budgeting thing is all about. Okay. So I started to just do what any other millennial would do if they're curious about something and they don't know what the hell it means. You Google it. I was just like, hey, Google, what does budget? Who is spreadsheet? Like bleep, bloop, blah, blorp. I don't even know where to start. But what really got me started in personal finance is when I was Googling and when I was looking into those things, it struck me so hard that every top voice, every master, every leader, every time somebody wanted to recommend a book or a blog to me, white men, white men, white men, white men, white men, white men everywhere.
But isn't that our world?
That is our world. I was like, of course.
And nothing wrong with that, honestly. I'm dating, my boyfriend's white.
I mean, my partner's white too, and I will tell him to his face that there's everything wrong with that.
But
Yes, I'm like, that's a problem, God damn it. And because it makes no sense. It's not like older privileged white men are the only people with money problems. And also when they talk to me, a brown girl, child of immigrants, about money problems, does not relate.
Yeah.
Yes, does not connect at all. So that's what really got me kind of angry and indignant, and was like, you know what?
I love that. Okay.
Let me try to put my butt in this thing and see what happens.
Okay.
Yes, and that's what happened.
And so that's how it started.
Yes.
Okay.
The very first post that I created on Instagram was about how I had been creating this budgeting system by basically just journaling my money every time I got a paycheck.
Okay. If y'all need context on this, go on her top YouTube video, how I paid off $50,000 of debt. Yes. And she talks about Felicia's Wallet, which is an online Google Doc.
Yes.
Created that's like 60 pages long initially.
Yeah. At this point, I think it's like 180 pages long. It's crazy.
I know, and it's literally something anyone can do. Like at the end, she's like, "This is what you do: open up your doc, and then be real with yourself about your finances," which is like literally the step none of us can take because we haven't been taught to actually ask those questions.
Exactly. There's so many questions we haven't been taught to ask. We haven't been taught any kind of hallway or doorway into finances that makes sense to us. When I started learning how to budget, it was like all these outlets were like, you should use this Excel sheet, and you should use this app, and you should read this book. And I was like, first of all, like we just said, like it's all written by white guys, and I cannot relate to your voice. I'm already turned off. Second, like that stuff doesn't working for me. It's like I'm not naturally a numbers person. So I started journaling in the Google Doc. And that's how it really started to work for me. And then when I started to share, hey guys, I made up this random Google Doc system. I don't know. What do you guys think? The reaction from that was huge. Like the comments, the questions, the emails and the private messages that I got of people were so shocked that a woman of color was talking about her money on the internet. And so that's when I was like, oh, we're onto something here.
Well, that in itself is just when I see somebody that looks like me, such as you, talking in this convicted way about personal finances, it puts my mind in a set of like, I can start thinking about this. Exactly. I have the ability to take control of my finances as a Filipino, as a brown woman, as a woman of color, as a person who doesn't have any of this history in her family. And so thank you for being that first face. And it's crazy because we talked about this time, there's a lot of firsts.
Yeah, like you as Crystal building Filipinos on the Rise, it's not like you were like, oh good, I can just copy paste the model of all the millions of Filipino platforms out there.
Yeah.
That is super. There's so many successful ones that are just spilling our stories out everywhere. We're building this ourselves. Right. And we are at this very interesting sort of precipice. We're between our parents' generations who mostly grew up and born and raised in the Philippines, and ourselves who have to figure out how to function as full-on Americans inside of, and this administration's America, which is a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
So everything that we do is a first. Everything that we do is a draft.
But it's almost like, okay, it takes a point of there's no one like me. There's no one like me. This is so annoying. I can't relate. And then you almost find it's like, oh, it's me.
Yes.
I am that person
exactly.
that needs to step in and take ownership to listeners who are like, I don't see myself in this space, a space that they're passionate about, that they want more Filipino representation, and it could be them, but they're feeling a little incompetent or, self-doubt or just lack of resources, support. What do you say to them?
Oh, I would say something that I actually said during my lightning talk, I believe, in Entrepreneur, is that if you don't see the stage that you belong on, then you build the stage yourself. Oh. If you don't see the platform that your face would thrive on, then that means it's your calling to help make that platform, or to find the person that is trying to make that platform and lift them up too. Because like you were just saying, Crystal, it's when you look around and you're like, I don't see it, I don't feel it, I don't see me, and it's so frustrating, I don't see me. That in itself is a reverse call to look at yourself and be like, oh shit, that means it's on me. That means that I'm the one to create that for future people. And so And it's also like there's so many advantages
Right.
to that feeling right now, because like you and I are recording a podcast
Right.
in an office like we're not supposed to be recording a podcast in, because that is like the technology we have access to now, right? Like you can create
Use what
these
you
things,
have.
you use what you have,
Literally.
and there's so much to have. There's so much
you
to
used
use.
to Google Doc.
Yes, I
Like
used to
you
Google
weren't
Doc.
like, oh, let me make an app.
No. I was like, let me do, for me, I was like, and this is probably something that if that person is listening now, that's like, oh my gosh, like where can I make the platform? Where do I belong? Use something that's already innate to you.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I did not like, numbers and Excel sheets and apps were not innate to me.
Yeah.
What was innate to me was journaling about my feelings. That's something I did
'cause
all the
you're a
time.
natural writer.
Love to journal. It's always the most consistent thing I did my whole life. So I was like, what if I took journaling and turned that on money? Like took that journaling energy, put it on money.
I love that.
And here I am.
I think you're like breaking barriers of what, like we get so close-minded sometimes about like avenues of expression
Yes.
and education. Okay, for example, finances. This means sheets and charts.
A degree.
And yes, a degree, but it's just like, well, I write, so let me do Google Docs.
Exactly.
And then you paid off your $50,000 of debt.
Exactly. And I did not need like Google Sheets. I didn't need to create an app. I didn't need to use an app. I used what I understood. And that's what really made me realize that like money is not a thing that we should have to DIY for ourselves. Like we just said, it should have been a life skill. It should be something that we learned the way we're supposed to, like, we get home ec classes, old school, and we learn how to cook and you learn how to sew.
Or we learn European history.
We learn European history from European teachers with European textbooks and European story, and it's all effed up.
You're like, can I have 10 minutes of learning about
Yes.
my people or finances? Like,
Or brown people, or like, exactly, like the whole...
that's the thing I'm going to use.
Exactly, that whole meme of just like, so I have no idea how taxes work, but I do know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Like, why do we know that shit? We don't know how to file taxes.
Absolutely.
It's so ridiculous.
Just so you know, there's different forms of putting out content in there. Berna literally has memes for days that speak to my soul and make me feel like I can take control of my finances.
That is, I think, actually a really important part of the work that I do, is that like what I didn't see enough of in the finance world is humor. Like internet toilet ass humor, Reddit humor, TikTok humor, like the humor that you and I speak.
And Filipinos are naturally humorous.
We're funny. Yes, we express ourselves through joy, through laughter, through singing, through dancing. And like us internet kids, we express ourselves through memes. Honestly, what inspired me about that was like the rise of like social and political memes. Like the fact that you can learn about like I learned about what happened with Notre Dame through memes. That was like making fun of the concept and like how we're treating it. And you can work backwards and be like, oh, that actually educated me. So I'm like, I think we can educate people in that same sort of almost like insidious Trojan horse way of like, ha humor. But this is actually meant to make you think about paying your bills. Oh, snap. Now you're thinking about paying your bills.
Now people feel connected to it.
Exactly.
It feels something within what they can grasp and relatable to them.
Yeah.
Lesson is find a craft that feels natural to you.
Yes.
And find a way to apply whatever your purpose or your passion is through that. Like it literally doesn't have to be this traditional way of doing things. You might just surprise yourself with the revolution that you're creating, just like Berna.
Exactly. I would say that like try to find a way where it doesn't already exist. Like that should be your priority.
That's your thing. That's your way in.
Exactly, because only you are going to be able to connect your Greek mythology passion with rollerblading. You know what I mean? Like, and the world has not seen that before, and so
you will find your community that relates.
You will
to
literally
that,
find your
weirdly
community,
enough.
or you'll make it. Like when I put together like Financial and Hype Women, I was like, this makes no damn sense. No one's gonna understand what it means. But I felt like I was putting something in the world that didn't exist, and the response really affirmed that.
Did you ever hit times where you're like, no one's gonna appreciate this? This is, this is not gonna speak to anybody. Because I like to dig into people's low points a lot of doubt. Because if our community, especially the women, go through anything more, it's like this process of self-disqualification.
Ooh, wow.
And this like echoing of what our families have told us. Tell me about the low point and then what pushed you.
Of course. Oh my gosh. I think this, the sort of skipping over the low points in my life, kind of like, like you skip a rock. Like there are so many points in which culturally I could have been denied what I wanted, but I had to push through, or something happened to basically convince my family that it's worth it to push through. So God, it's so random, but I remember being in Chevy's with my family.
Oh my
gosh. And for some reason proclaiming over a dinner at Chevy's to my mom when I was maybe 11 or 12, I was like, I want to be a writer. And they were like, no, you always said, like, at that point I had learned that when I say I want to be a doctor or a vet, my family gets excited. You know, like as a young person, I learned what to say to make them happy. And I learned that to say that you want to be a doctor or a lawyer makes them happy. So I would always be like, I want to be a vet because I like pets. Yeah. But I was harboring this secret, like, no, but I love to write. I want to write for a living. And I remember telling that over Chevys, and they were just sort of like, stop. Like, psst, that whole, just like, calm down. That's like not what we're going to do. And I think my like grades in writing and reading, which were way better than my grades in math and science, kind of proved that. I was just like, if you want me to be a doctor, I'm going to be a shitty doctor. I know. But I am going to be a good writer. So those grades. And then there were so many moments, especially in my adult life, that I got into a role of prestige, a role that my Filipino parents were like, all right, we can brag about it.
Yeah, this is braggable.
This is braggable. Like, she got into USC. Let's brag. Yeah. She's working for 17. Let's brag. And so when I decided to quit working in the publishing industry, quit working at 17, of course, my parents came fast with the like, what are you doing? Why would you do that? This is a stable job. You worked for this. Like, what am I supposed to tell my friends and family what you do? You know what I mean? Like, how am I supposed to communicate this? You're jumping ship to go work at a camp. Like, what kind of money does that even make? Like, what is that all about? And then same when, I used to work for Instagram. I worked for Facebook for 2 years. And then my parents were like, oh, hell yeah. Get like, to brag on people. Yeah. When like aunts and uncles visited the Bay Area. Exactly. Berna. She works at the Facebooks. She works at the Facebooks. Yeah. And like friends and family would visit from wherever, from the Philippines, from Vegas. And I could take them on the Facebook tour. And it was like this big thing. And so when I told them that I was quitting Facebook so that I could travel for a year and then maybe be a freelancer in New Zealand and through Asia, they were like, why? Like, I think at this point they were like, we're so used to making weird ass decisions that it was just like, whatever. Yeah. But they're I think to this day they're still a little bit concerned. I think bringing home the ABS-CBN award helped.
Awards do that.
They do that,
it's
especially
like this
when
very tangible.
Yes.
Affirmation.
Exactly. But there were definitely low points. And actually, I would say that the lowest point, it was more of like a sort of low boil thing that a message that I carried in my head that to me this day, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I told myself that. I told myself for the longest time that I would never be an entrepreneur. Wow. I was always like, you know what? I'm a really good worker bee. I really like to have a manager. I really like structure. I would always tell myself and other people that I'm such a good team player. Like, I really like to be told what to do. I am so good when you give me structure. And I like to have a manager pet my head. And I like for there to be a rubric. I like to get my gold star. Yeah. I realized that was bred out of being an obedient Asian American daughter my whole life. We are bred to be good workers. We're bred to be good followers and, really hardworking when you tell me what to do. And
so the concept of entrepreneurship was almost like anti that.
Oh, anti that entirely. I was like, that's not for me.
You kind of fight it off for a while, even though it's innate in you.
Yes. And like, it's funny because over the last 10 months, it's still been, so in January of this year is when I was like, all right, I'm going to try this thing. And so the last 10 months have been some of the hardest mental growth I've ever been through because I'm fighting against, it's been 10 months, great. But compared to almost 30 years of telling myself, I'm never going to be an entrepreneur. That's just not for me. I can never be my own boss.
So I'm sure there's so many people that wrestle with that. Like, you're not an entrepreneur. Just stay back in corporate America or like, things like that. Yeah. Like when you heard those, like in your head, the self-talk telling you you're not meant to do X, Y, and Z, like what kept prodding you onwards? Yeah. And what advice do you give to listeners who are constantly hearing that, but then feeling something different?
Gotcha. So I think my first few fights with this voice in my head started when I started to do smaller things that I always thought like, whoa, I never thought I would be able to do that. Like, for example, moving out to New York City by myself and like getting into freelance. Like, there were moments where like, I sort of pushed myself into a place where I'm like, I'm going to do freelance. I'm going to pursue this goal of like, I'm going to quit 17 and I'm going to go work at camps. And I sort of like finally get my head above water and go, that's kind of crazy. I never thought I'd be able to do that. Like, I just did that. Like, that's pretty crazy. A big moment, of course, was when I actually paid off my student loans. Oh. And like, 2-3 years before I paid off my student loans, I had considered student loans sort of like a terminal illness. Like, I'm just always going to have it. I'm always going to have it forever. And so having paid that off, I was like, once upon a time, not that long ago, I thought this was impossible, but I did it.
I feel that way right now.
Yeah. About your student loans.
Yeah.
Yes. That it's just like a thing that's going to be with us forever, which like, it can be, it might be. And the path out is pretty aggressive, but it's doable. And doable from a person who had no financial background, who had no help, who had no like kind of privileged platform on which to like manage these debts. I had to crawl out of that stuff myself. But having accomplished that, it was one of those things where I'm like, wow, I did that. What the hell else am I capable of that I actually talk myself out of all the time? And nowadays I still hear that voice. And you know, to be totally honest, therapy has helped me big time. Okay. Therapy.
But that's like, also stigmatized within our
community. Exactly. Ain't it crazy about all the things that are stigmatized in our community that actually hold us back? Because if it wasn't for therapy, then it would be really hard for me to separate out the voice that pushes me forward versus the voice that is meant to push me back. You know, like we'll hear all those voices and we think that it's our intuition talking. We think that our gut is telling us, you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. You should probably chill out. That's actually fear for me. For me, it's fear. It's fear of failure. It's fear of not being perfect at whatever it is. It's fear of letting people down. And I wouldn't have been able to identify that, I think, without therapy and without like basically a sanctioned and healthy way to talk out loud to myself, which is such an entrepreneurial thing to do.
Okay, so let's talk about generational falsehoods.
Yes.
I know we've been wanting to dive into this, but from a bird's eye view, what's happening with finances in Filipinos?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like, I mean, talk about the fact, like what we were just saying about being in such transition in like you and I are in the generation where we're constantly straddling home thoughts, America thoughts, like thoughts of our parents and our families, thoughts of my friends and my peers in America. We are constantly having to choose in our brains between what our families taught us about money and how we see money move in America itself and how we're seeing money move for ourselves as we become adults, you know, like maybe, for example, my mom would tell me all these things about credit that ended up not being true. For example, like, you know, you should always keep a really healthy big balance on your credit cards because the banks want to see that you're able to spend on credit cards. Ends up not being true. And that's like that.
Like, where did we get that from?
Exactly. Tanked my friggin' credit score for most of my life because I was like, you're supposed to have a balance. And then when I started looking into personal finance blogs and things, they were like, no. A balance is a bad thing. Wow. And I was like, so there goes my credit score.
I bet people are listening to this like, what?
What? Exactly. There goes my credit score for a million years. One thing that I think is really important, even just like a small example to bring up in the Filipino American community. So there was a survey by World Bank, I think in 2016 or 2017, where they surveyed all Filipinos in the Philippines and working abroad. They sort of surveyed all of us on our financial literacy, and they found that 59% of Filipinos in the Philippines and abroad do not use bank accounts. Straight up are not putting their money in bank accounts at all, meaning that they're putting their life savings in socks, under the floor,
in tin cans,
in shoe boxes. I know for a fact that my dad puts money in his socks.
Why
very, very good question. So when I saw that, I was like, I just got angry. I was like, oh my God, that's why like I wasn't really taught to bank. That's why like my parents are kind of weird when it comes to banks. They don't really know what's happening because they didn't learn.
Is it mistrust?
It's mistrust, but it comes for a very good reason. A couple of reasons. So one example is how, you know, in World War II, there was a lot of, you know, of course, like we know that Japanese forces came and just like fuck shit up in the Philippines, right? Turns out, so I did a little bit of like historical research through this. It turns out that Japanese forces, when they were trying to weaken the Philippines, they specifically targeted the financial epicenters of the Philippines, meaning Cebu and Manila. And they would bomb and disseminate Cebu and Manila because they knew that that's where the majority of Filipino personal wealth lives. Wow. Banks in Manila and banks in Cebu. So when they destroyed those banks, they were straight up destroying Filipinos' life savings, like regular everyday Filipinos' life savings. So when that happened, and it affected obviously millions of Filipinos in the Philippines, after that, of course, our families would be like, why would I ever trust a bank again?
Nope. I'm not putting my money in there.
I put my entire life savings and my grandparents' life savings, my home loans, everything I've ever earned in these banks. And because of the war, they were destroyed and could never be paid back because they were uninsured.
Along with all the other traumas that the war.
Along with all the other physical and emotional traumas we had to deal with. They had to deal with the fact, I mean, like, this is warfare, right? Like, the Japanese and other forces like that were, exactly, they played dirty. Because they knew that that would kill the morale of Filipino people.
Because we work hard and we save.
Exactly. And we trusted these institutions to protect our money. But when they were decimated in the war, there's nothing that anyone could do.
Yeah. And so are you saying that amongst, I'm sure, other instances, but that carried on to the philosophies of finances that we have now?
100,000%.
So like, but my parents, for example, wouldn't be like, oh yeah, we don't talk about, like, we don't do this because back in like 1941, whatever. Like, but it's just been passed down in this taboo way.
Exactly. And I think it's also solidified by the fact that money is not a conversation we have openly. It's not like we're talking every day about where our money habits came from. We're thinking about it all the time. We are told and shown our money habits in these very strained, restricted pockets of our lives, because the message that we get about money is we don't talk about it. And we definitely don't talk about it with strangers. And when it's not going well, we definitely don't talk about it to people outside of our family. You only show people that you're doing good. You only show people you're doing good by buying shit that you probably can't afford.
Louis Vuitton bag.
Thank you. That's right. You go to Vegas. You take all these trips around the world.
You take pictures in Italy with your family.
Thank you. You post it on
like
Facebook.
What's happening with the finances here?
But we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the fact that, like, I know Tita Boy cannot afford that Lexus, but he bought it anyway, and there it is on Facebook. I know for a fact.
Like, because he bought it, we should probably buy it.
Then we should probably buy it. And there's a lot inside of that. So, for example, for our families that moved from the Philippines, immigrated from the Philippines to the U.S., a lot of them were chasing what we know as the American dream, right? And it turns out that the American dream, as capitalistic as we are, like, symbols of the American dream are expensive. Yeah. Nice cars, big house, they're materialistic. And so for our families that come here, they sort of process that as like, in order to prove to the folks back home that I'm doing good, I got to buy shit.
Totally.
I got to buy this house. I got to buy this car. And to prove to my fellow Filipino immigrants here, I'm doing good. I'm okay. I'm not drowning. I might be drowning, but I don't want to show people. So a lot of our families spend and spend and spend to show that their sacrifice leaving the Philippines was worth it, and to show other Filipinos, I'm doing great. I don't know about you.
As if that supersedes what's happening on the back end.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's like, you just got to show you've made it.
You just got to show you've made it.
What can we like reflect on with our family, and how do we start taking back like that narrative of our finances?
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh. So the very first thing is, if you're like me, where I was maybe 3-4 years ago, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start in terms of like understanding my family's finances, just basically listen for if there are these themes that happen in your family, and understand that like this is not just happening in your family, but so many other Filipino American families, So one theme, I call it the frugal flex theory. And we talked about this in Entrepreneurs. So it's growing up with all these messages of flexing, like, I'm going to buy the expensive car that we can't afford. I'm going to refinance our house so we can buy another house, so we can show people that I afforded this house in Fairfield or Vegas or whatever. It's, fighting over the bill when all these families come together for dinner. We're going to fight over the bill. And you're sitting there like, none of you can afford this whole damn fucking dinner.
I'm always like, Dad,
don't.
Why are you doing this?
You can't do this, but it's a flex thing, right? So all these messages of flexing, but at the same time, you go home, you get behind closed doors, and then it's like frugality town. You're gonna pack food to bring to the movie theater. Don't buy that here. I could buy it for you cheap in the Philippines, aka fake.
Yeah.
Like, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. It's being spendthrift and coupon clipping and things like that. And so if you understand that you probably spent the last 2-3 decades ping-ponging between frugal, flex, frugal, flex, this is why you're confused. Like, this is why it's confusing. And so I would encourage people to identify whether they're inside of that frugal flex ping pong, and have some empathy for yourself in that, like, why are you confused about money? Because you were told all kinds of random shit about money, because you were told things that you were told confusing messages that don't add up. Yeah. And so be a little bit more empathetic with yourself. And then also, like, ask yourself, what was your family's individual experience with money, and how does that in any tangential way connect to the way that you function with money now? For example, my parents were very into the frugal flex, big time.
Totally.
And even the frugal flex, it's funny because you could say like the frugalplex, like it feels like a Filipino, I don't know, cineplex, frugalplex. But like for example, my family would typically spend even though we didn't have the money. And if we came upon money, for example, if somebody won something in Vegas, boom, Chanel purse. Chanel purse, why? Don't know. Pretty sure we're still behind on the mortgage. Pretty sure we still own we're leasing that car. But we spend the money anyway. And then I saw that in my adult life. Like, the more I thought about them, the more I was like, yeah, that is something that happened in my financial life growing up. Like, I saw that and that was confusing. The more I was able to connect that with my own habits of, like, when I come upon money, when I get a bonus at work, I'm like, what can I splurge it on? I'm not thinking about saving it because I didn't learn to save stuff like that. I'm repeating what my parents did. So in what ways are you repeating what you saw?
Oh my gosh. So it's almost like, what ways can you break a generational curse?
Yes.
of finance.
Exactly.
That's so great. Those are things we don't think about. Like,
Yep.
we always like talk about, the concept of generational curses of like, my family raised kids like this, so I'm going to break it and do this. But it's just like the finance aspect. Like, we don't think about that as how that was transient.
Yes.
Through and through. Right. And like, you're so right. When I think about like, now I have money. Now I have like, what am I going to do with it? And what am I going to ignore about my like realities? And it's just like literally what things pass down.
Yes.
I just remember my own, like, I love you, Dad, but literally like, we can't afford that because this is this much. And then like, this will cost this much. And then it was just like this like urgency all the time, like from like extreme, like disaster urgency mode to like, and now we're gonna go on a trip with the 5 families to on a cruise.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, what?
How?
How?
It doesn't add up. Yeah.
And then back to that, and we're just like, we're spending too much on this. Like, don't spend on that.
Don't turn on the heater.
And then it's just
it's
like,
exactly that. I'm always telling people that like the same way that we analyze and unpack relationship trauma that happened to us when we were kids and how that presents itself when we get into adult relationships, same exact thing with financial trauma. Same exact
financial
thing.
trauma.
Yes, because money is so personal.
So personal.
You deal with it every day.
Get on that though.
Yes.
Like, in your own financial movement. What does financial freedom and transparency actually look like?
Sure. So freedom and financial transparency, of course, starts with us. I think it's incredibly hard. This is something that really pissed me off about the personal finance world. Is that, they would encourage, like the things I would read in the podcast, they would encourage you, look at yourself and your own personal finances, but then talk to your family about finances and how it's always worked, and talk to your family about your financial history. Yeah. Crystal is like shaking her head at me.
No.
Because that would not fucking work. In a Filipino American family or an Asian American family, you can't just roll up to your mom and be like, hey mom, how come you sucked at saving money? How come you sucked at this? Or like, how come you always taught me weird things? Like it just does not move that way inside of our families. And so I think it's really important to first become financially transparent with yourself and also be very gentle with yourself, because it's just like unpacking childhood trauma. You can't just be like, well, that happened and now I got to move the hell on. I got to make this budget. Like whatever you unpack about your finances is going to also unpack a lot of emotions around your finances. Like for example, I have a online course called Budget Camp, and it's like a budgeting course. And one of my budget campers, we always go through this like exercise of unpacking your financial baggage. And it was an amazing epiphany she made where she was like, I asked these basically budget campers to start writing a letter to your money as if it was a person. And she started writing that letter, and she was like, it was the weirdest thing because I started to write the letter and I realized that these are the words that I wish I could say to my absent father. It was nuts. Yeah. She was like, these are the words that I wish I could say to my absent father. And I realized that I equate money with the way that my father was in and out of my life. He was the financial sort of like holder for our family. He held the money and he held the love. He withheld the money. He withheld the love. So I grew up feeling like I could never really earn his love. I could never do enough to earn his love, and I could never do enough to earn the financial freedom he gave us. And so growing up, she felt completely out of control with money and just assumed that it was out of her hands. And so she kind of talked herself out of creating financial structure for herself.
So it's almost like we can personify our relationship with finance.
100%.
Like that's so radical.
Yes. You can talk to your money like it is a person. I guarantee you, if you go home tonight, drink some wine, and start writing out your letter with money, you will be so surprised.
I get like a twist in my stomach
when
you say, get real with your finances.
Exactly.
Look at your budget. I'm like, no.
No. Exactly. And I'm not asking you to go hurt somebody. I'm not asking you to bend your morals. I'm just asking you to look at your money. But even just that sentence, you see how emotional it's already tied up. And
because it's so personal.
It's so personal. It brings up feelings of adequacy and inadequacy. It brings up feelings of self-esteem, what your parents could and couldn't give you. Like, it is just one of the most personal things in the world.
So how are you personally empowering your fellow Filipinas when you do this?
Yes, of course. So I think, and it's kind of like what we were saying before, of just our existence in any space, especially all white spaces, is a revolution in and of itself. So I think one way that I empower fellow Filipinas and also women and women of color is just to exist in the personal finance world. Like when I show up at these conferences, these all white conferences, and I stay, that is one way that I sort of stand up for Filipino people, you know,
Right.
when
and you speak up.
and I speak up. Exactly. When I raise my hand and surprise people with the fact that I could put together a damn sentence. Wow. A revolution for Filipinas. But also like the more that I persist on creating videos and creating social media content, the more that I bring the conversation of money into the Filipinos around me and normalize it and normalize it and normalize it, it helps to put money in their brains in a way that wasn't put there before. Exactly. And financial freedom can free up so many other parts of your life. So
like in a nutshell, if you're like promoting it, like you could do this, like what has it freed up in your life? How has it changed your life? Like,
oh my gosh. That's so funny because I was just talking to somebody today about this. Okay, debt freedom is something that I literally wake up every day, and I'm not kidding. Like, this is not just an Oprah like gratitude thing, but I literally wake up every day, and at some point in the day, think about how grateful I am to be debt free. And I was saying to somebody earlier today that it's like having gone through your whole life living on one lung, and then suddenly getting two. You didn't even realize how anxious you were. You didn't realize how oppressed you were. You didn't realize how much weight you carry every single day until the weight is lifted, and you're like, oh my God, I can breathe this way. I can breathe this way. And to breathe this way means to be able to make decisions like, I'm going to try to be an entrepreneur this year. I would have never made that decision if I had debt.
So you start taking on all these other
risks.
Yep.
Chances. Yep. I can say
because you're financially free.
Exactly. I can say yes to taking work off for a week to support my sister who's moving into a new apartment. I can say yes to becoming an entrepreneur. I can say yes to flying across the country to support a friend at an award show or something like that. Like I can say yes to being a better friend, a better daughter, a better family member because I don't have...
It's not even spending that money on the Gucci.
No.
It's about finally doing the damn things you wanted to
Exactly. And it's about being able to make decisions without financial fear.
Yeah.
Which
you
like...
can buy the Gucci.
Exactly. And you can buy if I felt like buying the Gucci, if I was a Gucci buyer, I'd be able to buy all the goddamn Gucci I wanted because I'm not buying the Gucci with the like secret accessory of debt fear that always comes with buying the Gucci before that. So it's just like being able to be free to make the decisions that I want. And like I would have never been able to strategize my business like the way that I have if I was constantly worried about paying off my debt. I would be like, well, I got to go get a side hustle or I got to go stick to my 9 to 5. Now that I don't, like, I could conceptually go many months without earning money because I don't have debt eating at me, you know? And that time is invaluable. I think about it every day.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like, let's get free.
I'm like, how much later do I want to wait to get financially free?
Yes.
Like it's either gonna come or it's gonna keep holding you back.
Exactly.
So, that's crazy. I feel like I just want to go home right now and like actually.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% wish drink wine. Start with drinking wine. I would 100% like, I 100% wish I started earlier.
Yeah.
I could have been having fun in my 20s without the ball and chain.
Oh my God.
But it's a ball and chain I didn't realize I had
and
until I got it
time is
off.
the one thing you don't get back.
Exactly.
Right.
Time is why I got into this game.
Wow.
Like, I'm not teaching people about money so that you can be more rich or paying off your debt is great.
You can optimize your time
so you
and
can
your
get that.
gifts.
Exactly. So you can get time back for yourself because
that's good.
Wasting time is like a crime. You know, wasting time and wasting money is a crime in the US, right? Like it's a crime in our brains and our systems. So the opposite of that, the revolution of that is being able to take care of your finances so that you have all the time in the world to do whatever the fuck you want and to build what it is that you want. You know, like we were saying earlier today, like, you know, build the stage that you wish you could see, but like that's real fucking hard if you have a 9 to 5 and you got bills.
Well, I was just saying, I think that's what holds a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs back. It's like, well, I need this 9 to 5 job because I have my rent and I had to pay off this
and I got debt.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, money is, it's not the most important thing, but it's like the minute that we start taking control of that, you're releasing ourselves.
Yes.
Like, I almost like I look at you and I'm like, she's debt free. I wonder how many avenues that like you feel more free to walk through.
Anything.
That's so crazy.
Anything. Like, I feel like I could just like up and decide I want to be a stand-up comedian tomorrow, to be honest, which is like terrifying and scary. But like, I could decide that because I'm not like, well, I got debt to pay for, so I can't be making those switch. I could switch whenever I want. I really can. Like, and that's coming from a place of a lot of different privileges, but probably the biggest is being debt-free.
Right. I remember, what was the money, the number breakdown? Like, a lot of Filipinos don't even know about the 30, 25.
Oh, girl, yes.
Like,
And they serve it like most people know this.
Oh my God.
But we don't.
Yes, absolutely. So I was doing this sort of roundtable interview with Yahoo Finance, and the interviewer was like, all right, y'all. So, besides the 50-30-20 rule, what are some personal finance advices that you wish people knew more? And I was like, hold the goddamn phone, because I don't know about y'all, but my community doesn't know about the 50-30-20 rule. This is not like obvious knowledge to us, and treating it like obvious knowledge is what kept us out of the game in the first place. Because apparently we're supposed to know this shit, but no one's telling us that stuff, and not in the media.
It's so foundational.
It's so foundational, apparently, but no one gave us that foundation.
I learned about this 2 weeks ago over coffee.
Exactly. And I learned about it through a blog, and I was like, I can't believe I'm reading this for free on a blog. Yeah. Like, and this is not
it
something
was
you're teaching
never
in school.
like taught to me. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
In a nutshell, what is it?
50-30-20 is basically a skeleton, absolute basic way to budget. So 50-30-20, those numbers are percentages. And the idea is that a smart way to start budgeting is to break up your paycheck in 50%, 30%, 20%. 50% should, and I say that with quotation marks because these are all percentages you can mess with. 50% should go towards your, what I call adulting bills. So rent, electricity, phone, minimum payments, all of the things. Sometimes I call them my come get me bills, because if you don't pay them, someone's going to come get you. That's your 50%. 30% is your fun money. I call it ratchetry. That's just whatever you want. That's going out with friends, entertainment tickets, ratchetry, whatever. It's like the things that just make you happy that you want to spend on. And 20% is your extra towards your financial goals money. So it could be 20% towards your savings, 20% to pay extra on the debt that you owe. But it's having that structure, very basic structure of this is a suggestion of how to treat your paychecks from now on. Because then it covers all the necessities in your life while also leaving room for the fact that you're a human being and that you're going to want to spend money on a street falafel or going to on a day trip with your friends.
And basic things you can start with your next paycheck.
Absolutely. You can start with your next paycheck and think 50-30-20. And then the next step from that is please get your money out of the 1.5 or 2 piles that you have it in a bank. I know a lot of people have one savings and one checking. Take the 50-30-20 rule and have that be the structure of your banking. So have one bank account for your bills, that 50%, one bank account for your ratchetry for that 30%, and one other bank account for your savings, your 20% goal. That way, when you go out to the club, you're only bringing your 30% money out with you, that debit card out with you, and you leave your rent debit card at home.
Oh, I've never thought about it in the physical sense of the card you bring when you're...
Exactly. It is so, because if you keep your money in a pile,
it's all one thing. Oh my!
Then you are spending your rent money.
So logical.
Yes.
So logical. And I've never thought about it that way. God.
Because no one is teaching you this stuff. It's logical. It's basic.
I feel like I'm 25 and I'm being reborn.
No,
this is so sad.
No, it's not sad. You are receiving the information almost and I tend to be hardcore, a conspiracy theorist about this kind of thing, but I'm you were meant to not receive this information because when you are financially disempowered, it's easier for more powerful people to control you. It's easier for people to be good, we can keep Crystal in the 9 to 5
But that's just how the banking institutions are really set up. So if you don't really know,
good, they benefit.
You're going to get played,
Mm-hmm.
So
they benefit from you not understanding how interest works. They benefit from you overdrafting so that they can take an overdraft fee from you because you don't know.
It's so daunting. There's so much in it feels like a dirty system.
It is.
And you're I'm just trying to survive.
Exactly.
Maybe I can dream about my business someday.
Yes. Well, that's the funny thing is you think that banking is a system that you can trust, but it turns out it's a business too. They depend on you not knowing how to bank so that you overdraft and they collect the fee. Overdraft fees, this is going to make you really angry. I think in 2018, banks collected a total of, I think, $35 million in overdraft fees from American citizens.
Most of that's from me.
Right? That's what it's is it not a whole industry in and of itself? Of course, the banking system, they want to protect the fact that they can collect $35 million in overdraft fees, so they don't want you to learn about it. They want you to be stupid.
I wish that we, a Pinay can just set up a central banking system. Okay.
Hello.
Berna Bank.
Bank of Berna.
Bank of Berna.
Exactly.
Banking by Berna.
Big, big APY. You get hella money for your buck. Low interest fees, no fees.
I'm done. I can trust you and I don't know if you can trust me with my credit, but I can trust you.
It's gonna be very forgiving. There's gonna be no penalty fees. It's gonna be all bankrolled by the man.
Everyone's gonna go through a financial literacy workshop
exactly
before even doing that, which I think everyone should be doing.
I know it should be
signing up for banking account.
I know.
Anyways, so this podcast platform is all about how do we elevate Filipina excellence and empower Pinays to pursue their passions, reclaiming their identity, and then a bold way.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful we've had you, because I think most of us need to start with our finances and our money.
Yeah.
If we're really gonna like take ourselves to the next level. How many of us are still being so held back by finances, and just even talking about, like, I hear finances and budgeting, and I'm like, oh, okay, but also pass me another bottle of wine.
Clench.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do see this movement as like it's part of the synergy of elevating our excellence and bringing us into a place of like true freedom. In a line, what can you say about like reclaiming your financial falsehoods and then like empowering yourself? Like, what do you want her to know that'll do?
Yeah.
For her future.
Sure. Oh my gosh, that's a little pressure. What do I say? I'm going to take this as if I was speaking to me like 5 years ago, before I got into my financial journey. To talk to 5 years ago me is something that 5 years ago me did know, is that there's one language that powerful people speak, and it's money. You know, you understand and you know that we are inside of a system that could give a shit how idealistic you are. It could give a shit what you're trying to manifest. It could give a shit what your morning mantras are, whatever the hell. At the end of the day, we live in a capitalistic society. Yep. Exactly. And we're all compromised by it, and we all have to move according to its rules a lot of the time. And there are rules that we wish we could break, but if we break them, we don't eat. So, but at the crux of those rules is money. And at the crux of money is power. Money is the most powerful weapon we have to fight the man. It really is. Like, if every quote unquote regular working class person decided to spend their money only on, for example, sustainable clothes, or only on, local organically farmed foods, the fashion industry would change. The food and grocery industry would change. Yeah. The only way we can take the attention of the people at the top is when we control our money differently, because money talks, and money is the only language that they speak at the top. And that's sort of how I would get into sort of like the little mini revolutionary in my brain, is like, not only is it personally revolutionary to finally feel control of your own finances, but if you hope to make any kind of impact in the world and to go from your small, like, I'm a child of an immigrant voice, to someone that people at the top listen to, then you have to understand that they are not listening to anything but the way that you spend your money. It's wild. These companies are collecting our data so that they can figure out how to make us spend money. Exactly. And so once we become conscious of the way, not only that we manage our money, but the way that we spend money, which is sort of like the next sort of evolution of becoming financially free, we are the most powerful beings on earth, because whenever we spend our dollar, we vote on who we want to be successful. We vote on what we want to succeed. And if for some reason everybody woke up tomorrow, we all started, for example, spending all of our money on like women of color owned businesses, do you know how like Wall Street would freak the shit out? Like, it's just, money is the only language that powerful people listen to. And like, if that is the seed that gets 5 years ago me started on figuring out their personal finances, then great.
What can any of us do going home? We just want 3 steps right now to get real.
Yes.
And it's easy. We can get on our laptops, open a bottle. What do we do?
Okay, first thing, get on your laptop, open a bottle, open a Google Doc, and write, Dear Money. And start talking to your money as if it was a person. Actually, the way that might be fun for you to start doing this, I did this at a workshop at the Wing the other day, is pretend that it's 2 a.m. and your money is an ex-boyfriend and they texted you, hey, are you up? And finish that text. Like, how would you respond to your money if your money was your ex-boyfriend texting you at 2 a.m.? That exercise was so mind-blowing to do at the Wing, because people, like, the things that you would say to a emotionally unstable ex-boyfriend is a lot of the times what you would say to your money as well. So start talking to your money. Just get crazy. No one's looking at your letter. This is just your letter. So what would you say to your money if you were asking them to act differently for you, or if you're telling them what you needed from them? That's step 1. Step 2 is to open up this conversation with one person that you trust with this question. What is your first memory of money? It could be, I think it's especially powerful if you ask a sibling, a family member that's a peer. I wouldn't go straight up to your mom and be like, what's your first memory with money? Because they're going to be like, what the hell? Like, what did you have to, like, why are you asking me this question? But it's incredibly powerful to open up a conversation about money with someone close to you, because I guarantee, like I would literally bet my life that whoever you ask, they're hiding financial anxiety that they don't know how to share with anybody. And so if you become that person for them, it opens up money as a topic in your relationship, which is like, it is game changing. And it brings money into your world as opposed to this conceptual thing that you're supposed to be good at. And then the third thing, 50-30-20, baby. 50-30-20. Like, if you stop listening to me in terms of budgeting advice forever, if you just take 50-30-20 and rock with it however you need to for the rest of your life, you will be infinitely more financially organized than if you just spend money willy-nilly.
Love it.
Yeah.
There you go. You have no excuse.
None.
I have no excuse.
None.
I could do that.
Well, I'm like, be gentle with yourself. You do have an excuse.
Yeah,
You've at this point, it's been over 2 decades of telling yourself probably unhealthy and sad stuff about money. So be gentle. Yeah.
The word money and empathy just don't go together.
But it has to.
It has to, because there's no other way out. We have to start being nice with ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what's coming up for you, Berna? Come on.
Oh my gosh.
Do a little,
What's 2020? 2020 has so much like symbolism, like new vision. I have so much like a vision for Filipina on the rise, and there's this momentum that's being built, and I just feel like there's like something coming.
Oh my gosh.
What's
yes.
coming?
All right. So my major 2020 vision is this: Robin Hood. So it's taken from the rich and given to the poor. Here's what I mean by that. I am, and I'm wondering like if any of these corporate relationships will be listening to this podcast. Sorry, y'all. My whole vision for 2020 is being able to leverage my relationships with corporations and with brands, because personal finance is hot right now. And I also happen to be very aware of the fact that brands are interested in me talking about personal finance because I'm a brown woman. They're trying to up their diversity quota. And I feel complicated about that, of course, but I'm also like, I'm here. And also it's kind of the way that I got into personal finance in the first place. It's like, if I am able to take your coin so I can live and continue to make free and low cost stuff for my people, then I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take these brand sponsorships. I'm gonna do workshops at these big tech companies, help them however the heck they want, take their money so I can float myself to make more videos, more low cost courses, more workshops, and more accessible things. Because the whole problem is that these things should not be inaccessible. These things shouldn't be behind an impossible paywall. But there are companies that are willing to pay me, so I'm going to take that money. Like it's Robin Hood 2020 all year. Exactly. I'm creating my own products, like budgeting courses and one-on-one personal finance coaching. So I'm going to be actually re-releasing my budget camp at the beginning of December, and potential whenever you're hearing this, so maybe I'll have re-release it again. So get on that, because then you'll be able to have a one-on-one conversation with me, which is a really good time. And just more video shenanigans for sure in 2020. More of my face. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm so ready for it. No, I love it.
Thank you.
You guys literally have to watch these YouTube videos.
Oh God. Just not around me. It's really embarrassing for me to watch you watch it. So please.
I love it.
Well, anything else you wanted to wrap up on or say?
That's it. I would say that I'm just so thankful to be interviewed for Filipinos on the Rise, because there are no platforms like this. Right. There are very few of them. And now I know of them because we have to dig in onto each other and support each other. But I'm just so honored to be able to rap about Filipino money. And even last year, I couldn't have conceptualized a whole podcast session on Filipinos and money. So this is just really incredible.
Right. This is probably the only conversation that exists digitally about Filipinos and decolonization and money.
And money and millennial stuff and people who speak internet. This is the only one. So we're this is a revolution in and of itself.
I love it. I'm so thankful you're with me in this room that we're kind of allowed to be in.
But kind of not. Eating snacks that we're kind of not supposed to eat, and drinking wine we're not really supposed to drink.
Drinking rosé. I've learned so much.
I feel like this is
definitely my own financial consulting session. So consider this your free financial consulting session, and then go on her website, her platform, and just start to dive more into. So thank you, Berna.
Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. I'm so happy to contribute.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Feel free to leave a comment about what you thought. And if you haven't yet, follow on Instagram at Filipina on the Rise. I hope to see you and hear from you there. Thanks, everyone.